leading the news today. The public career implosion of former Justice Minister Kiri Allan, who got herself arrested over the weekend. The latest in a series of public downfalls of public officials. And, questions have to be asked about how this is being treated, especially by the Prime Minister, political commentator and director of the Democracy Project, Dr. Bryce Edwards, joins us now. Kia ora, thank you for your time.
Morena, Andrew.
If this was the first occasion, it would be dramatic enough, having a Justice Minister arrested basically for drunk driving. However, this isn't the first incident. It's about the fifth by my reckoning. There have to be questions asked, Bryce, I think, about whether or not this was a bad captain's call, whether the judgment of the Prime Minister needs to be called into question here.
Look, this whole case is shocking, but like you suggest, not surprising.
Yep.
There's been other things leading up to it, and also quite tragic, really, to see a minister like this imploding in the public eye, and the humanity of it. All leads us to have sympathy for the minister, but I think you're absolutely right that the focus now goes on the role of Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and whether he's managed this well, and whether he should have even had the Justice Minister, the then Justice Minister, back in her role when she was so obviously going through internal, domestic, private difficulties, and there were signs there. She was on social media saying some very alarming things. She's been through so much that I would have thought an employer would have had a very high threshold for having her back and in the role. And she was being given a huge amount of high level, heavily political jobs. She was the Justice Minister in an election campaign where justice is becoming the key issue. So huge amounts of pressure on her from the Prime Minister, lots of portfolios. It's always going to be hard for a Prime Minister to know, and I think he was pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if he had dismissed her earlier, if he had given her more time away, that would have also been a bad look for his government.
And may not have been much better for her mental health, honestly, either.
Possibly, that's right. So I think he rolled the dice and said, let's bring her back in and hope it all goes well. And it hasn't.
Every sympathy for Kiri Allan, and given what she's facing from a health point of view, from in terms of her relationships and workplace stress and those sorts of things. But honestly, if this is the best that the current Labour government can offer, obviously she had signs that she could have been a talented minister, but if this is the best that they've got, and this happens, honestly, Bryce, is it over for Labour at this point? Is this the tipping point when it comes to this election and whether or not Labour is electable as being involved with the next government?
Surely the chances of the current government being re-elected have plummeted this morning. If this was just a one-off, maybe people would give the government the benefit of the doubt. But, even as a one-off, this is the Justice Minister being arrested and charged, and avoiding dealing with the police. This is really quite extreme situation that won't be forgotten for a long time. This is without precedent, actually, within New Zealand political history. A Justice Minister or any minister to be charged by the police, to be... I think the Prime Minister said she was charged with resisting arrest. I'm not quite sure if that's accurate or not, but this is just not what a Minister of Justice should be in the headlines.
Failing to accompany a police officer, I think, is the formal charge that they've landed with. Now,
which is an end for her. But of course, it comes after all of these other shaky and shambolic events of other departures. Michael Wood, Meka Whatere, I can't remember who the other ones are now. There's been so many.
In part, though, would it be fair to say that this isn't a situation totally of Chris Hipkins' making, that he inherited the firestorm in this one? He's been handed the poison chalice heading into this election. It always was going to be tough to turn public opinion round. He's done a reasonable job, but even with the problems with the individual ministers, those weren't his call initially. This was the team that he inherited, as it were.
Yes, so there will be sympathy for the Prime Minister, who, by and large, has been quite solid as a Prime Minister. He's just being let down by his team. Maybe there'll be a bit of a sympathy expression from the public for what he's had to handle. And if you saw him in the press conference earlier, he looked tired.
Yep.
He looked quite shocked really by what he was having to deal with. But like I say, I think there should still be questions asked of him and his handling of this, and why he thought that she was so able to come back given the signs, which were kind of flashing there saying there's a problem.
Mental health problems, there were obviously drinking problems, not having the discernment to say the right things at the right time. The signs were all there looking back. I mean, hindsight's a good thing, but there were several opportunities to opt out for this one.
Oh, look, this also isn't Kiri Allan's first controversial thing this or in the last year.
Yep.
She was in trouble as Justice Minister for accepting donations from Meng Foon, the Human Rights Commissioner or Race Relations Commissioner, and not declaring that as a conflict of interest. She was in trouble when she dealt with RNZ by going to one of their I don't know what to call it now, a farewell event whereby she, very strongly criticised RNZ when ministers aren't allowed to do that in terms of their operational things. And then of course the alleged mistreatment of staff or working relationships in her office, which we've never really got to the bottom of yet. Obviously, the Prime Minister was able to investigate and find out what was really going on, and he gave her the all clear to continue as a minister. And I still suspect that something might come back to bite Chris Hipkins on that.
To be fair, he was overseas for most of that month and was kind of managing the Prime Minister's office by remote, and things were put on hold for a while. Again, not necessarily best practice, but what else could he do? Yeah.
When he came back, he had a meeting with the Minister of Justice and said, what are all the speculation stuff about treatment of staff? I need to know the details. Presumably, she told him all the details, and he said, case closed, essentially, let's carry on. And I suspect that some of those details will come out, and they will reflect very poorly on his judgment in letting her carry on.
Just finally on this one, is this good news for every other political party? Or is it the case that actually those left of centre, those who would have been potential coalition partners with Labour, should they be able to form a new government, is this also bad news for them, in your opinion, Bryce?
Well, it's terrible for the Greens and for Te Pāti Māori in terms of their hope of being able to form a government. It's possibly good for those two parties in terms of, they will benefit from some voters departing from Labour, which is what I suspect will happen over the next few weeks.
But having a higher percentage in opposition isn't the same as being even cross-benches support of a Labour government, certainly.
I guess so, but Labour cabinet ministers, backbench MPs really will be despairing at the moment, and they'll have sympathy for Kiri Allan, but they are the real big losers. I think we're going to see a Labour vote that could start going down steadily after this.
Any thoughts on who will get the portfolios? I mean, not really any opportunity to get your feet under the desk. I mean, where it's school's out for summer, really, when it comes to politics between now and the election, really? Look,
Andrew Little, I think, is probably the best bet to be Minister of Justice. And I think he would be a very good Minister of Justice again. And this is the big portfolio of the moment. So that's my guess. It's a bit hard to see how you, as a Prime Minister, can shift the the deck chairs around
Yep.
on what feels a bit like the Titanic.
It is. It certainly looks like it is all going down for the Labor government. Bryce, appreciate your extra, a bonus, Bryce, this week on this unfolding situation. But hey, thank you very much for your comments. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.